Today I'm going to show you how to make the most delicious concentrated tomato paste without cooking, without canning, and without refrigeration. Welcome back. My name is Corinne Phillips, and this is Fresh Pea Cooks. Today's recipe comes courtesy of Megan Gold, one of my subscribers that wrote into my Facebook page asking for summer tomato recipes. So when it's 90 degrees out and you're pulling 70 pounds of tomatoes out of your garden, like, what am I going to do with these? I've got to can them, I've got to heat up the kitchen. Sometimes that's just not an option. Or maybe you're just in a hurry and you don't have freezer space and you need to do something quick. This is what you do. This tomato paste recipe comes from Sandor Katz. It comes straight out of The Art of Fermentation. It's not a recipe book per se. It's more like an anthology. It's a collection of all of the different cultures and all of the different cultured foods that have come out of these different countries and kind of how they go about doing it. So this is Conserva Cruda Di Pomodoro. It's an old world Italian way to preserve tomatoes. And what I love about it is you can reduce your tomatoes down by about an eighth. So 8 pounds of tomatoes will reduce down to 1 pound of tomato paste. And when you've got 50 or 60 or 70 pounds of tomatoes, that's a very, very appealing scenario. Here's what you need: fresh, ripe, summer tomatoes. Don't try this with those grocery store ones. You will not be happy with the end result. So get really good, really ripe, fresh tomatoes and sea salt. And that's all you need. If you don't have sea salt, don't use Morton salt. Don't use any of those table iodized, any of that for anything canning. It has anti-caking agents, it has chemicals in it, it has iodine, which leaves a really metallic taste and sometimes oxidizes fruits or vegetables. You can use pickling salt, you can use kosher salt, you can use canning salt, and you can use just regular sea salt. We're going to start by cutting out the stem part of our tomato in any soft spots or anything that looks a little dubious. These are beautiful heirloom tomatoes, but they're seconds that I got from Mariah's greenhouse. So some of them have some little sunspots, and I'll just cut those off. We're going to smush them up into our container, cover it with cheesecloth, and let it sit on the counter for 4 or 5 days. That's it. No salt, nothing. Just tomatoes sitting on the counter. I know everything we've been told about don't leave food out, like it's gonna go bad, gets thrown out the window here. So what happens, and I'll read from The Art of Fermentation. Fermentation occurs spontaneously, quite similar to the alcoholic one, in an acidic environment and supported by lactic acid bacteria and molds. The bin must not be completely full and must be covered by a canvas or net to keep insects away. The mass bubbles and the solid parts come to the surface and become covered in a white mold. Yes, white mold. Stir it twice daily. Just stir the mold right into the tomatoes. After 4 or 5 days, depending on the temperature, the fermentation stops completely. So you'll see a lack of bubbles, you'll see a lack of movement in your sauce. Remove the solids floating on the surface and pass them through a low-tech machine that separates the peels and seeds, or you can just put them through a colander, or you can just grind them up in the blender if you don't have something to separate them out. Strain the pulp in a fine mesh or cotton bag tied closely with a string. Hang it to drip liquid for a day. The bag may be covered externally in mold. If so, remove it by shaving with a spoon. Discard. Also shave the inside of the bag to separate the pulp and the now reduced solids. Retie the bag and place it between 2 wooden boards or panels, clean and dry, and weight it down evenly. Press for a few days until the pulp has the consistency of a firm dough. Mix in 25 to 30% salt. A few hours later, knead the dough. It's very salty, it's very concentrated, and has to be used in very, very small quantities. The yield is about 8% of what you start with. I'm just going to cut these in quarters, and once I fill my bucket, I'm just going to use my hands and just smush them all up. all remember Mo from last year's canning videos. I was over at Mo's house, and she's the one I got this idea from. She's been making it the last couple years. And she had just sauteed some chickpeas, boiled them, and then sauteed them with garlic and onion, stirred in a little of this tomato conserva, and that was it. And I can't tell you how simple but delicious those beans were. So this is wonderful stirred into garbanzo beans, white beans. It's such a delicious, delicious concentrate. For those of you who are visual and like to see photos or like to submit your photos, I have an Instagram account, and I'll put the address just below. Feel free to post your food pictures. I love seeing when you guys create recipes and what you come up with. It inspires me. Okay, so here's the fun part, is you just get in here and smoosh these up. I would suggest not wearing white when you do this. I like to live on the edge, apparently. And just squeeze them up and get all of those pieces broken down. And you could probably also run this through a food processor, but that just doesn't seem to be nearly as fun as this. I love summer tomatoes so much. And my favorite way to eat tomatoes is on a piece of really good sourdough bread with a smear of cream cheese, a ton of black pepper, and a little bit of salt. I don't think it gets any better than that. But this new stuff, this little pot of goodness that we're going to create here shortly, is one of those things that just makes something as simple as a pot of white beans into something quite extraordinary and delicious. The flavor is very complex. It's very umami. It has that richness that tomatoes have, but this, it just makes it really concentrated. And you use it like you would salt. You use it about as sparingly because it's 30% salt. So it's very salty, but it adds so much more to your dish than just using plain salt. You can make a pasta sauce and stir in a little bit of this and just bring that flavor up like to a whole new level. I think mainly what you want to do is just get the juice out so that it kind of covers them. We've definitely attained that. Okay, so here's what my pieces look like. They're just kind of smushed up bits. Now we're just going to cover this with cheesecloth, an old piece of sheet, whatever you have. It doesn't really matter. You just want some air to go through. And I don't have a rubber band big enough. So I'm going to tie a piece of twine around it. And we got to get in here twice a day, so you don't want your contraption to be like hard to get into. But make sure it's tight. You don't want any little fruit flies or anybody in there laying their babies. Yucky. There it is. 5 days, 4 or 5 days. If it's really hot, start checking at 4. When activity stops, and you'll start seeing activity probably within 12 to 24 hours. When activity stops and the bubbling ceases, Mo said there becomes like kind of like a film on the top. That's when you know you're done. After that, we're going to puree the whole thing. I have a tomato mill, which runs through and pulls the seeds and the skins out. It's a very inexpensive little plastic device. I think they're made in Italy for the purpose of tomatoes. I'm going to run it through that, and then we'll add salt. Not until then. We want this acidic environment to be on its own and not be salty for the original fermentation. Salt will preserve it once it's fermented. I'm going to be filming it daily. I'm going to give you what it looks like in the morning and what it looks like in the afternoon, both times when I stir it, and I'm going to be following it until it's done. And then I will film part 2 of this series. And for those of you that are watching this video after the fact, I'll go ahead and link to that second part here. Let it sit. Let it do its magic. I like putting stuff like this in glass. I try to eliminate most of the plastic that we use in our food especially, but mainly I like to see it, and if I see it, I remember it and I don't forget about it. To me, tomatoes are summer. They're the epitome of my garden, and I plant probably more tomatoes than anything. This year I did get my tomato plants in very late, so cross your fingers that I'll have tomatoes, but I'm going to be canning some tomatoes, whole plum tomatoes in tomato sauce, and I've got some other fun tomato recipes that I'd be happy to share if you guys are interested. All right, I'll see you guys in a couple days. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. It really does help us creators, and I will see you guys next time.